The first breakout session this afternoon. I'd like to introduce you to our speaker today, Ryan Campbell with Happiness is Camping, if I can say it right. He's going to do a continuation on of his talk yesterday in talking about positive we've learned throughout the pandemic and how we can continue them on. So take it away, Ryan.
All right. Thank you, Megan. I appreciate it. Megan, could you make me a host so that I could share my screen, please? Or Lori? Perfect. Thank you.
You're good now.
All right. So thank you everyone for being here. As Megan said, my name is Ryan Campbell. I'm the camp director at Happiness is Camping in New Jersey. This is a continuation from my presentation last night. So if you weren't with me last night, we talked about what I refer to as the boring, important stuff, the administration side. So that was arrival and departure, our meal procedures, healthcare procedures, communication, and staff training. Today's a lot more fun. Today is about the crux of our programming and activities and ways that we filled over 800 programming slots this summer with all of our crazy protocols in place. So today we're going to go over, I did this a bunch yesterday and I just need to stop touching my computer. Cohorting, daily changes to our daily schedule, our pool operation, cabin wars, which was by far the best thing that came out of this summer, and our new camper favorite activities and new traditions that we will carry on with us forever. So this is, it's a lot of information that I'll be throwing at you, but after each slide, I will pause. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and it's a lot easier to go through the questions topic by topic as I go on. But I would like to make this as interactive as possible. And if you operated in person this year and you had some awesome activities that you'd like to share, I want to give everybody some time at the end to hear those great activities as well. So just a refresher, again, I'm from Happiness is Camping. We own our own facility. And in 2021, we offered 26 days of residential camp, 3 days of family camp. So we had one family camp weekend, 14 days of staff training, 14 days of rental groups, 140th reunion with over 100 attendees. And our staff was 15 paid staff, 10 volunteer counselors, 20 volunteer medical staff. We had 2 sessions of residential camp. The first one was 16 days. The second one was 10 days. We had 50 campers in the first one and 57 in the second one. So we had over 100 campers. And of course, the most important number there, 0 cases of COVID. So this next slide is extremely intimidating, and I understand that. This is the highlight of our 30+ page COVID manual. So Don actually sent this out in September to the entire membership. So you may have it already in your emails, but if not, I'll put my email in the chat later and then you can ask me for that. And if you like to read, I'll send you all 30 pages of our protocols as well. So we had a fairly aggressive testing strategy where everybody had to arrive on camp, vaccinated or unvaccinated, staff or campers. Everybody arrived to camp with a negative PCR test taken within 72 hours prior to arriving. When they arrived, they again took a rapid test. And when that was negative, they were admitted into camp. And then on day 4 of both sessions, we ran another PCR test for everybody. We focused a lot on outdoor activities, way more than ever before. We administered over 500 PCR and rapid tests over the course of the summer, over those 26 days of residential camp and 3 days of family camp. Something that we'll talk about today. So anything in gold are things that we're planning on doing for the foreseeable future that was new this year. So our kids participated in cohorts of 8 to 10 kids. We'll go into depth about that. We added airflow and UV lights to all of our cabins and indoor locations. So in total, since we own our facility, we spent about $70,000 in facility upgrades to make them COVID friendly and to meet the state of New Jersey's recommendations, ACA, CDC. We ate all of our meals that we could outside, weather permitting. I created what I consider to be a fairly overbearing masking policy. I thought it was going to be far too much for our kids to follow. And much to our surprise, when the kids got here, they actually enforced an even stricter mask policy than what was written. So basically, our kids wore masks at all times unless they were inside their own cabin alone. If they were outside, completely distanced from any other cohort. And when I say completely distanced, I mean like 50 feet away from the next cohort, or if they were eating or at their lunch table, or if they were swimming. So even when our kids were going back and forth to each activity, they still wore masks, even though they were outside, just in case they came within 10 feet of another cohort. We had 2 cabins in the pool at a time with the volleyball net separating them. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Our staff bubbled, which was huge for us. It mitigated a lot of risk. Even though all of our staff and volunteers were required to be vaccinated, they still stayed at camp for 7 weeks just to limit any exposure they would have. Each cabin had their own water cooler, and we closed all common bathrooms. And this was to prevent congregating and touching shared surfaces. We disinfected way more than ever before. So I had one of those electronic guns that we would blast all of the high touch areas at least 3 times a day. We used daily screening logs that were really crucial. So each morning before breakfast, the counselors would ask COVID related questions to their kids. They would write down their answers. They would take their temperatures. They would hand in the sheet to the medical staff. And if some kids were flagged, the medical staff would determine if we needed to do any follow-up rapid testing. We staggered drop-off and pick-off, and we did all medical triaging outside unless the diagnosis warranted more intensive care. Those are 2 things that we talked about last night. We limited deliveries. We did mandatory parent informational Zoom sessions, which was new last year. We did online training for our volunteers and our paid staff. And we had a 2-week staff training, which was twice the length of our normal staff training. So those are all the highlights. Does anybody have any questions about any of those policies that we put in place last year?
There's one question that came through. Did campers get to interact with other cabin cohorts at all? If so, when or during what activities? Did they express a desire to interact with other campers outside of their cabins more than they were allowed to?
Jennifer, it's like it's like I planted you there to ask that question. We'll talk about a lot of that in detail coming up. The short answer is that each night we had a night activity where the entire camp was together, which normally took place under our big dining tent. So we would still have the entire camp under there, but they wouldn't ever be mixing. They did everything together in a cohort. And you know what? Let me just go to the next slide because it's a perfect transition. So the way we'll frame our discussion today is since we're talking about what we did last year, but what we're going to keep forever. So we'll talk about what we used to do prior to this summer, the problems with those methods, what we did this summer in the middle of the pandemic, and why we'll never go back from the changes that we made. So Jennifer, here's the answer to a lot of your questions. So I think one of the most important things that we did this year was cohorting. And it was also the biggest disruption to our program. So what we previously did was our schedule was set up so that campers had 3 periods of free choice each morning. So they would the program staff would basically stay up until midnight every night planning the next day's activities. The staff would be assigned to these different activities the night before. The campers would then go to the dining hall at breakfast. They would have a choice of, let's say, 8 activities per activity period. They would sign up individually for the free choice periods that they want, and they would participate in those activities all morning long. Then in the afternoon, we had a cabin choice activity where the cabin as a whole could choose which activity they did. But that activity, honestly, before this year was pretty much a wasted period. It had the least amount of engagement in our schedule. And to be completely honest, it was an afterthought. So we meet every Saturday night before the session starts. And more often than not, we would break for the evening. And then the program director would run in and say, oh, we forgot to pick our cabin choice activities. The counselors would pick the first 4 activities that came to their mind. And then that's just what the kids did in the afternoons. And then the entire camp would mix for all other activities that mostly happen at general swim and at night activity as well. So if you would have asked me what problems this format had before this year, I would have said none. Any problems that it might have had would, you can just kind of chalk up to, well, that's camp. It is what it is. Looking back now, it was flawed, but that's something that I would have never noticed before this year. So the curriculum was very independent based. The kids were choosing a lot of their own activities. So they spent a lot of time doing their own thing throughout the day. There wasn't that sense of community that we saw in 2021. As I mentioned, cabin choice was basically a waste of time before this year. And planning for activities was really intense. As you can imagine, coming up with 24 activities every day is difficult to do. Especially doing it the night before. Our staff were often ill-prepared because they were just learning their activities the night before. There's a lot of moving parts. So you can imagine 10 to 12 6-year-olds picking their activities, forgetting them instantly. Then the counselors trying to pack them up for the morning. And if this one's going to the pool, this one's going to sports, making sure they have their water bottles, their swimsuits, their towels. It could be a nightmare, and it could be a logistical chaos, basically. And as you can imagine, there's lost and found everywhere. So, and there's no way to claim it because you don't know who was in the last activity. So what we did in 2021 that was so different is all of our activities were done in cabin cohorts, meaning that the kids participated in every activity together as a cabin. And the reason for that was, if there is contact tracing, you know exactly who is contact traced. So you want to limit anyone's exposure. So if these 10 kids are always with these 2 staff and one kid tests positive, then you know that there's only 10 to 12 people total who are exposed to COVID. And if you follow all your other procedures, nobody else gets contact traced, especially when the state comes in. So that's the main reason that we did cohorting. So this year, activities were pre-assigned by the program director 3 days at a time. So the program director would come in, schedule Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Wednesday afternoon would meet with all the counselors individually, learn about what activities the kids liked, what they didn't like, and would use that information to determine their next 3 days of activities. Cabins also wore masks if they were at a specialized activity with an outside counselor, so something like ropes or archery.
Ryan,
And
how many campers did you typically have in a week?
so this year we
In
had
a session?
51 session, 57 the second session. In a traditional year, we have 75 to 85. So we limited our numbers this year.
And you may be answering it, but there was one other question. Did your planning staff discuss or consider allowing an all camp activity once PCR tests were negative a few days in? I'm not sure if you have it coming up or not.
Great question, because that was our plan the entire time. That's the reason that we had, I'm sorry, I keep saying a 16-day program. It was a 15-day program and an 11-day session. So that's how we got our 26. So the entire time we knew that we were going to bubble our kids. So we always planned on, after we received those negative PCR tests on day 4, we thought that camps closed from the outside. We know that there's no COVID in our camp bubble. and we can have this little paradise in the middle of the woods where we know that that COVID is not in the camp, and we can mix and we can have a normal program. So that was our thought process until 2 weeks before camp started. The state of New Jersey came in and released their new mandates and told us that we weren't allowed to break cohorts until day 16. So it was like, if we stayed one extra day, we could have had 1 day of normalcy. So that's why we never mixed ever. Trust me, we wanted to, and logically going through it, we had like a 99.9% certainty that there was no COVID on camp. So reasons why we'll never go back to our old thing, sort of. So for 2022, we plan on reversing our old schedule. So remember I said we used to do 3 free choice activities, 1 cabin activity. Next year, our plan is to do 3 cabin activities and 1 free choice activity. This year, our cabins and the campers within the cabins bonded like never before. It was unbelievable. So our number one concern is, if you have 1 or 2 bad eggs in the cabin, that could ruin everything because you're stuck with those kids. You're stuck with your peers the entire time. We thought there was going to be a lot of sibling fighting, which at times there were some quarrels. But what we saw was the kids supported each other and bonded and made friendships like never before because they went through this experience with the same 8 to 10 kids. We had very few kids sit out of activities, which is fairly unique for us. You normally can go to dodgeball and there's 3 or 4 kids sitting out at an activity. But because they bonded so much, they supported each other and encouraged each other to participate. And even if it was an activity that maybe 1 kid didn't like, they still saw it as, okay, let me participate in this activity because eventually I'll go through an activity that I like that others don't like, and I hope that they're engaged in it as well. And that's something that our counselors stressed as well throughout the sessions. My favorite stat of the entire summer is that we never had lost and found. We didn't have 1 item of lost and found the entire summer. And it's because if a sweatshirt was left on a sports field, when the next cabin walked up, they know exactly who was at the sports field before them. They just radioed over to the counselor, and 100% of the time, it was whoever was there last. So that was a cool little benefit that we did not expect. And one awesome thing that came out of this was it really gave us more opportunity for progressive skill building or long-term projects. So we have a pretty robust STEM program here. And normally the kids would have to sign up for the STEM program and they do it for 45 minutes and then they go about their week and they never return to STEM. But because they were cohorted this year, the entire cabin could work on building a robot that may take 4 hours. So if they don't finish it in that first hour, they put all the pieces to the side and then they come back to it the next STEM activity. And that was something really cool. It gave our kids a big sense of accomplishment. It helped a lot with things like archery, where since it's the same counselors working with the same kids, they know exactly where the kids are at skill-wise, and they can give them practice. And we saw a lot of improved archers, a lot of improved swimmers as well all summer. Our counselors loved the stability of the schedule. There was 1 cabin that actually had a lot of kids with brain tumors and a lot of kids with autism. And the counselor said that because the kids were together all day long, it provided a lot of stability and it was easier than ever before to work with those kids because the kids knew exactly what to expect from their schedule every day, day in and day out.
Now, Ryan, going sort of along that lines, do you have kids who have a cancer diagnosis as well as siblings the same week? Do you just have kids with a cancer diagnosis? What's your makeup of your campers?
Good question. So we're about 70% children with cancer, 30% siblings, and each session about 5% of our kids this year were on active treatment. So usually it was about five or 6 kids in both sessions. In a normal year, that's as high as 25%. We didn't limit that intentionally. It's just something that kind of happened this year? We didn't have as many kids applying that were on active treatment. Good question. Kids tried more things outside of their comfort zone because they were being assigned activities this year instead of getting to choose their own activities. And we saw a lot of kids that were protesting at the beginning of the activity. And then they learned later on that they actually loved doing the activity. Fewer moving parts, less risk of kids being in the wrong place. So if you have free choice activities at your camp, everybody knows that 7-year-old that was supposed to go to arts and crafts but went to archery instead, and then you have that 2 minutes of panic. We didn't have any minutes of panic this year, which was always a good thing. And this schedule was way easier on our programming staff. They got to go to bed every night at 11 instead of staying up till 1 or 2 o'clock programming. So does anyone have any questions about cohorting?
You've hit all the questions in the chat there, Ryan. Susie from Camp One Step commented that they did not have any lost and found either, and it was fantastic.
It is. Yeah, that's a weird thing that came out of the pandemic that now if I ever see a sweatshirt laying around again, I might get a little bit more mad than I would in another year.
One more question there before we move on. Did you have siblings together in cohort groups, or did you separate siblings?
Good question. So our groups were cohorted by age. So it was children with cancer and siblings. Just the general makeup would be 6 to 9-year-olds, 10 and 11-year-olds, then 12 to 14-year-olds, and 15 and 16-year-olds. Those were kind of the main 4 age groups that we had. We had 4 male cabins, 4 female cabins. All right, so moving on from cohorting. Oh, but I just wanted to cover this picture down below is an extreme example of what cohorting looked like. So to answer your question earlier, Jennifer, the only pushback that we ever had was the older boys always wanted to hang out with the older girls. The older girls never expressed that they wanted to hang out with the older boys, so it was kind of a one-way relationship. But so we would take these meet and greet opportunities where they would sit. You can see how far apart they are from each other. Everyone's wearing masks, even though they're outside. Most of this age group is vaccinated, but that's kind of an extreme example of the cohorting that we did. The only other kind of instances that we saw were siblings wanting to hang out with each other, which is totally understandable, which we prepared for. So we gave them the opportunity. We have some chairs outside of cabins and some quiet places to talk. So we would just put the kids 6 feet apart from each other with masks on and just let them talk as long as they wanted to, just so that it wasn't a traumatic experience and they can bond with their siblings. And that worked really well, and we never had any pushback from that. And hopefully we will never have to be that strict again. Fingers crossed. So this is a comparison of our daily schedules. The one on the left is from 2019, which represents how we did things for probably 39 years. And then 2021 is on the right. One major thing that you can see instantly, that was the first thing our staff and campers noticed. Breakfast was 15 minutes later, and our rest period was much longer. We were always worried that the kids would get bored if they spent too much time in the cabin, and we found out this year quickly that that was not the case. Most kids slept the entire time, even the younger ones, and if the younger ones didn't, then they were playing cards in the cabin, or they were playing games, put on a DVD, things like that. You'll also notice that we only did 2 activity periods in the morning versus 3 the old way, and then we had 1 activity period, and we call it a cabin choice, but really it was just an extension of a 4th activity in the afternoon. So our days were much slower. They were much more relaxed. Cabins would go back to the cabin before and after each activity. It gave our counselors the ability to prepare way better for the next activity. If kids needed to use the restroom, that's when they did it. If kids had a change for their pool, or if they needed sunscreen, things like that. This year was really at our kids' pace. And what we found is the kids wanted a much slower pace than normal, and we would have never guessed that. So even though we gave kids, we told them what their activities were going to be, we assigned them, the cabins had the ability to change those. They just had to radio the program director to make sure if they were going somewhere else that place wasn't already occupied. And a lot of times if a cabin was burnt out, which after 15 days of camping, it happened a lot, the cabins had the ability to just stay in the cabin and rest for one of the activity periods. So we initially went into this year thinking that we were going to do 2 15-day sessions. We got to day 13 of the first session, and there were 100 zombies walking around. The staff was done. The kids were completely cooked, as we called it. And we made the call right then and there that the second session was going to be shorter. And parents actually thanked us for looking out for the kids. And when we announced that it was going to be shorter, the staff and the campers all cheered at once. So it was a lot for our kids to do, especially because it was kind of the first time they've been out of the house for a year and a half. So they were way more tired than ever before. So it was a good call to shorten it. And I would have made that call 100 times out of 100 looking back. And then, of course, our activity periods were an hour long instead of 50 minutes long, which really helped us do more in-depth, more intensive activities than we normally can. In a normal year, you're taking attendance, and then by the time you explain the activity, then there's really only 20 minutes before then you have to clean up for the activity. But this year, since we didn't have to do attendance, it was basically you get to the activity, you do it for 50 minutes, you clean and disinfect your area for 10 minutes. So it gave us a much longer time to actually engage with the material. Does anybody have any questions about our schedule or anything like that? Another thing I'd like to point out is that we got rid of free time, which is something that we've been trying to creatively do now for probably 10 years. Most camp injuries happen during free time. And you know, that's when you get the jammed fingers at the Gaga pit or the kids falling off the playground. And this year they went back to their cabins, and then the cabin wanted to go to the Gaga pit. That was supervised and there was only 8 kids there. So I think moving forward, we're going to have restrained free time for now on as well, moving forward. All right, so moving on now, we're about halfway through here. So the pool was another huge difference. So in a typical year, all of the campers would swim together each afternoon at our general swim period. So there would be about 75 kids in the pool, 20 to 25 staff in the pool at one time. Then the pool was always offered as a free choice activity each morning, each activity period. So pool games, swimming lessons, pool sports, things like that. And the problems that we saw with that format in a typical year was the participation in the pool activities in the morning was incredibly low. We often had 3 or 4 kids in the pool at any given time, mostly because the kids didn't want to get wet in the morning and then go to all their different activities in the morning. It may have been too cold, or their friends didn't sign up for the pool, so then they wouldn't sign up for the pool. And it drove, my dad is our executive director, it drives him crazy because the pool is like the most expensive program piece every year. And so he wants as many kids in the pool as often as possible. Having 75 kids in the pool is very manageable. Our pool can fit about 150 kids, so it's definitely not an unreasonable number, but it can be a little bit stressful at times, especially if you have kids that have external fixators and you're trying to prevent them from getting bumped while they're in the pool, or if kids are swimming and trying to protect their ports and there's a lot of splashing going on. So it can be a little bit stressful at times. And a lot of times what we saw is kids who needed swim lessons were embarrassed to sign up. So if their friends weren't signing up with them, they didn't want to admit that they couldn't swim, so they would often not sign up for swimming lessons. And then of course, they're not benefiting from that free service that we can give them. So what we did in 2021, we had 2 cabins in the pool each activity period. So instead of having a general swim, the oldest boys and the youngest girls would go in the pool together during activity period 1, and then that would be their quote unquote pool time or general swim. So we would always have a senior cabin in the 4-foot section, junior cabin in the 3-foot section, and we would rotate the deep end every 10 minutes. The boys are jumping into the deep end there. And the reason for that is simple, because everybody who is a senior 12 and up was over 4 feet tall. So even if a kid couldn't swim, they could at least stand in the pool and we didn't have to worry about that. And of course, we have kids who are less than 4 feet tall in the junior ages, so then they could stay in the 3-foot section with no problems. We have a pool volleyball net that we ran straight down the middle of the pool to divide both cabins to provide a physical barrier so that the kids never got too close to each other. And then the way we rotated it is that maybe on Monday, they would do some sort of organized activity. So maybe on Monday, they do swimming lessons. Then when they came back on Tuesday, they would have a general swim. And then when they came back Wednesday, they play pool games, Thursday, general swim, and it would rotate that way. And the cabins would also rotate their swim period each day. So if you swam during activity 1 on Monday, on Tuesday, you swam activity 2, Wednesday, activity 3, and so on and so forth. So one cabin wasn't getting stuck with the morning swim every time. The things that we saw this year, the pool has never been more popular than it was this year, and it wasn't even really a particularly hot year that would kind of change that. The kids were all in the pool all the time. So if all the senior boys were in the pool activity 1, they were all swimming, which has never happened before in the history of our camp. So what we're going to do next year is I think one day we'll feature a general swim where the entire camp is together in the afternoon. And then the next day will be 4 separate swim periods, just like it was this year, so that we can have the best of both worlds. Sometimes the entire camp is interacting with each other. Sometimes it's still the smaller groups. We also were able to reach every single kid who needed swimming lessons this year, because it didn't matter if you have a yellow band, which means you're a good swimmer and can go in the deep end, or if you had no band, which means that you couldn't leave the 3-foot section. Everybody got swimming lessons. And again, what I said before, everybody supported each other through the swimming lessons. And it was really awesome to see, that 13-year-old girl that had no swimming experience go through swimming lessons and then get to retake the swimming test, and having her entire cabin lined up outside the pool cheering her on was just something that we've never seen before. That was a really cool benefit that we had this year. And of course, the lower numbers in the pool, much more manageable. So does anyone have any questions about the pool aspect of it?
No questions there, Ryan. You're looking good.
Perfect. So this is by far and away the best thing that happened in 2021 as far as programming. We called it Cabin Wars. So in a traditional year, we host Color Wars, and the kids get put on the blue or the green team their first day of camp, and then they stay on that team for the rest of their life. So we have some kids who were here when they were 6 years old. Now they're 19-year-old counselors, and they've been on the blue team their entire life, and it's in their social media bio, and they refuse to wear green ever in their everyday life. And the campers would compete all summer long in these various activities like capture the flag, trivia. We'll go over the activities a little bit later. But obviously this year, that was something that we couldn't do with cohorting, because we couldn't mix all the kids that way. So normally the blue team is half the camp all mixed up, and the green team is half the camp. So we couldn't do that this year. So problems with Color Wars in a typical year, there's a lot of record keeping. So make sure that kids are being put on the same team year in and year out. The teams often get lopsided. So I mentioned earlier, my dad is the executive director. His favorite color is blue. So if blue ever lost a Color Wars, the following year, he would see all the big, strong kids that would sign up for camp, and they would automatically get put on the blue team. And then wouldn't you know, that Color Wars, the blue team won 400 to 50 throughout the summer. It was never competitive, but he never really cared because at least his favorite color won Color Wars. So it could get a little lopsided, and then it really puts a wrench in the program because kids stop caring. And overall, Color Wars really lost its luster for us over the last 3 to 5 years. When I was camper age, since I grew up at camp, there was drums and it was this huge, big deal. And now the kids really didn't care for it anymore. And nobody really got that excited about it. And it's also slightly alienating for our new campers because, as I mentioned, if you've been on the blue team for 10 years and you're a brand new camper, you don't feel the same spirit for the blue team that somebody who's been at camp forever would. So our solution to not being able to host Color Wars this year was to host a cabin war competition. So cabin wars lasted for the length of each session. So we did 2 separate cabin wars competitions. We had a junior winner and a senior winner to make it a little more fair, to make sure that the older kids weren't just completely dominating the competition. And at the end of the week, the junior and senior cabin that won earned a pizza party. So we have a good relationship with the local pizza shop, and they would just leave it at our security tent, completely contactless. Then we would go over, pick up the pizza, and bring it to the cabins. And another great thing that came out of this year was Cabin of the Summer, something we've never done before. So the cabin that our admin team believed was the most deserving, whether it was they had the best camp spirit or their performance in Cabin Wars, if they were the best cleaners when we do cabin and squad every morning, they won a pizza party and their name is on the wall of honor at camp, which has become a big deal all of a sudden. So in my estimation, I personally would never go back to Color Wars. I think Cabin Wars was the coolest tradition that's been started at camp over the last 20 years by far and away. It completely revitalized our program. The kids cared about activities like they've never cared about them before. Every single activity had this new added electricity, this new added element. It's the cleanest camp has ever been because cabin and squad scores were part of Cabin Wars. And so kids were going to their activities late so that they can spend extra time scrubbing the showers. It was the most bizarre thing I've ever seen in my entire life, but it worked. We had kids cheering all year, so they had organized cheers. They were wearing costumes. It was a really cool atmosphere. It was like a European soccer atmosphere almost. And it involved the new campers right away because they instantly became part of this brand new team that has never been formed before. And it became like a family instantly. And it was highly competitive, both sessions. Since there are 8 teams, there's 4 cabins competing for the juniors, 4 competing for the seniors. The scores never got out of hand and everybody was always in striking distance. So it was very competitive. You can see the session winners there just to show that, girls didn't dominate the boys or the older boys didn't dominate the middle boys, things like that. So we had a good breakdown of the winners. Our youngest girls even won session 2, which was the funniest thing because it was the 5 sweetest little girls of all time that just went out for blood when they realized that they had an opportunity to win Cabin Wars. And then our Cabin of the Summer was our second youngest boys, who on paper should have been our most difficult cabin. That was the cabin that most of the kids had brain tumors. A lot of the kids had autism. A lot of them had behavioral issues that their parents marked down. And it was the most cohesive cabin that I've ever seen in my life that just supported each other. Does anybody have any questions about the format of Cabin Wars before we go into the activities of Cabin Wars?
No questions in the chat right now, Ryan.
All right. So these are the Cabin War activities that we did. And if you ever have any questions about these activities, or if you want kind of write-ups on these activities, I'll be happy to provide them to you. So the activities in the left-hand column are activities that we've done as part of Color Wars that we were easily able to transition to Cabin Wars, game show night, life-size board games, which is traditionally giant Jenga, giant Twister, giant Kerplunk, things like that. Counselor Hunt, The Last Jedi, which I'll be talking about a little bit later, which is our Star Wars themed night, trivia night, and the Olympics. So those were part of Color Wars. They were easily transitioned to Cabin Wars, but it's the column on the right that made the biggest difference in our program, because all those activities on the right-hand column are things that we've offered before, and there was always a winner in the past, but it never really meant anything. It's just me announcing the cabin that won, they cheer, and then we go on and we completely forget about it. So by being able to attribute Cabin War points to these activities, our kids cared about these activities way more than they ever have before. So they include Guinness Book of Camp Records, where we give them, 20 different tasks, and they try to compete to see who can do them the fastest, who can stack the most, things like that. Casino night, lip sync battle, where if your camp doesn't do lip sync battle, I can't recommend that activity enough. We normally have a theme, so we've had Christmas songs, Disney songs, camp classic favorite songs, campfire songs, that the kids get up, they make this routine, it takes them all week to do, and then they present it to all the other campers. 30-minute infomercials, so they get a random prop and 30 minutes to come up with a sketch to describe those infomercials. My counselor Ken it used to be a rainy day activity that we would throw together at the last minute. And this year it was so much fun that the kids asked us to do it twice. So basically, the counselors from each cabin go up on stage and you give them a task. So let's say, do I think this counselor can catch a marshmallow in his mouth? And the cabin votes, yes, I do think they can do it, or no, I don't think they can do it. The counselor doesn't know what the cabin voted on. And if they were correct, they got points. So even if the counselor wasn't able to do it, if the cabin said they weren't going to be able to do it, they get points for that. Flea market, where they come up with things to sell and then the other campers come around and buy their items. Storage Wars, like the show, Storage Wars, if you've ever seen that. And Hollywood Premiere, where they this year they had to remake popular movies. And then we have this whole big red carpet event, and we live streamed it to our parents. So on the right-hand side is kind of shows the creativity of the difference of programming. So that top picture is from 2019, our casino night. The entire room is filled with kids. They're going to all these tables. In the left-hand corner, there are hundreds of prizes that are donated, that the kids earn tickets every time they win in one of the table games, and then they can go buy their prizes. This year we had no prizes. The kids couldn't mix. We couldn't go inside, but we know that casino night is one of our biggest traditions, and we had to do something casino night related. So that bottom right picture is an example of what we did, where we would play one game at a time and the entire camp would play that game. So on the right there, the cabins would choose 1 to 16, and then I would spin the big wheel. If it landed on their number, they earned cabin war points. And we did blackjack. We did this wheel. We did the roulette wheel, and the kids loved it. And it's another activity that they asked us to do twice in the summer. Totally unexpected, something that we just kind of threw together just to say that we did casino night, because one of our donors loves to sponsor casino night for us. And it turned out being one of our favorite activities. So does anybody have any questions? Ooh, lip sync battle fundraiser. That sounds awesome. All right, so we're gonna go on to the last slide, which is just other new activities that our campers loved that we'll be doing from here on out. Two types of activities that we've never really tried before that we had to do in the pandemic that we can now do in our normal schedule. One is station to station activities. So we have 8 cabins. And we would come up with these night activities where there would be 8 stations. They would rotate through the stations, spend about 5 to 7 minutes at each station, and keep going. So we did a holiday night where every station was a different holiday, and they would do something related to that holiday. So I ran, quote unquote, this is not really a holiday, but I ran Super Bowl Sunday. So when the cabins got to me, they could either decide if they wanted to play flag football, or they could ask me to lead them in cheerleading cheers. And 2 cabins did make me do cheerleading cheers, which was interesting to say the least, and definitely made for some good videos. Road rally, where they would go to every different station, and this might be they would make a cardboard car as a cabin, and they would go through an obstacle course, or they would go to the gas station and have chocolate syrup squirted all over them, or they would go to the car wash and get sprayed with hoses and soap, things like that, and giant board games as well. Our kids said that this was their favorite activity because all of these stations were their favorite activities throughout the year. Then let the dice choose games are something that actually came out of virtual camp. So basically you roll the dice, and the dice determines how many kids will be participating at a time and what the activity will be. So we did The Last Jedi, which was Star Wars themed. So if you roll a 1, then it is a lightsaber battle, and 1 kid from each team it represents, and then they have a lightsaber battle. If you roll a 3, then 3 kids from each team do we call it a spaceship battle, where they had to wear a hula hoop and run around and play dodgeball. And we did it for the Olympics as well, where 1 was 1 kid participating in cornhole, or 2 was mini golfing, and 2 kids would compete on each team. 4 was a basketball shootout, things like that. And it's really fun because you never know what the game's going to be. It's really varied, and it gets everybody involved. And it's always fun seeing the kids that can't hula hoop be forced to do the hula hoop thing. It was one of the funnier things that came out of this summer. And then the most creative socially distanced activities that we did this year that hopefully we may never have to do again. We did a prom this year. All the kids got dressed up. We had a whole catered meal. We had 3 tents on camp that served as our dance floors. So the juniors would go one area, the seniors would go to one area. They still had to stay with their cohorts, but they could at least be around the other kids. And because we did it outside and we have neighbors, we did a silent disco, which I think is something that we're going to do for now on, because it was just a cool, fun twist that the kids never did before. And then we would have an ice cream station, a tattoo station, a picture station. We did a pool party, which was pretty fun. It was basically a block party, and they just rotated through the pool, and they were assigned station to station. And my favorite activity, and randomly the kids, it was one of their favorite activity. It rained 2 different nights. So obviously when it rains and you're not allowed to go inside, it kind of throws a big wrench in everyone's plans. So we kept the kids in the cabins, and we did a radio challenge trivia where everybody would be on the same channel on the radio. I would ask a trivia question to one specific cabin, and if they answered, they get a point. But then we would also periodically do, okay, every cabin gets an iPad. So take 5 minutes and reenact one scene from a movie, film it on your iPad, and then we'll watch them all tomorrow, and whoever has the best will earn a point for that. And we got the best pictures and the best videos that we use in all of our marketing from them just being silly with the kids in their cabins. And that's something that we're going to be doing for now on outside of the pandemic as well. So does anybody have any questions over activities, cohorting, maybe something from the administration? If you have an activity that you offered in person this year that was great, we would all love to hear it. So if anyone has any questions or wants to say anything, now's the time.
See, Jennifer said, so many fun ideas, thank you. And she'd love to see your cabin war activity notes sometime.
Sure, absolutely. then that's my email. If anyone wants to email me, you can ask me for. We don't have very formal written activity notes. A lot of the stuff comes off the brain around Happiness is Camping, but I'll be happy to take it out of my brain and put it onto a paper for you as well.
Excellent. We have about 10 minutes left or so, so if anybody wants to come off mute and ask Ryan any questions, please feel free to do so. But thank you for being so interactive today. I'm sure Ryan appreciates it.
Absolutely.
I'll just add a couple activities that we used at Camp One Step this summer. And our programs director wanted to get one of those big, rent one of those big slip and slide kind of things. And we just really didn't want all the kids kind of heading into the same pool of water at the bottom. So instead, we set up slip and slide bowling kind of on our little hill. And it was body bowling, basically, using plastic sheeting and a hose. And it was probably one of the best activities. The kids loved it. They kind of did it by cohort. Each cohort had their own sheeting. So it wasn't shared amongst the groups. And some of the best pictures came out as those kids were kind of coming down that wet sheeting, and it was pretty inexpensive. The other thing we did was we really expanded our watercraft. We don't have a pool, which we did. We have the lake. But we had a lot of the blow up kayaks and paddle boards and things like that. And that was just, it was fantastic. And we really kind of went back to old activities, just the croquets and the bocce balls and the things that sometimes you put away, and really, those were very successful.
Thank you
Ryan,
for sharing that, Susie.
I'm curious if you bought or made your giant board game props.
So one of those giant games was Giant Connect 4, and we had a Boy Scout make that for us. Then we purchased Giant Jenga, Giant Twister. Giant Twister you can easily make yourself with a tarp. It's just a much bigger version of a Twister board. Giant Jenga you can really make with wood if you wanted to, though wood's pretty expensive now, so it might be cheaper to just purchase a already made kit. And Giant Kerplunk, to be completely honest, I wouldn't. If we had the opportunity to go back, I wouldn't have purchased it. It's just kind of there. But kind of what Susie just touched on, we simplified our program. We always thought we had to jam pack activities in. We thought we always had to offer the biggest, best activities 24/7. And this year required us to simplify everything from our schedule to the type of activities that we offered. And I will never go back to the other way ever again. And when I was at the ACA Day Camp Convention last month, all these private day camps buy these gigantic slides, and they're always bringing in outdoor entertainment to be better than the camp next door. And they said that they will never go back either, that being able to simplify their program opened their eyes because the activities were way better than ever before, just going back to the basics.
The other comment I will just add on to Ryan's before on cohorting, the connectedness and the bonding that occurred in those small cohorts was amazing. I think there was a lot of anticipation. Everybody you talked to said, anticipate the mental health issues. Now, we didn't have the long days that Ryan did. We brought our kids back for just a few days at a time, just to kind of explore the waters a little bit. But they were so happy to be together, but we didn't see the anxiousness and that apprehension from our new campers coming in. They didn't feel like an outsider because they came into a group where everybody knew each other. They bonded really well. They worked well together as a team. And really, we just didn't have behavioral or mental health issues.
Yeah, I really want to echo what Susie just said. We also prepared for mental health challenges as well. We worked with our the Warren County Board of Health provided some counselors on standby for us if we ever needed them. And we saw none of it. Even parents who said that their kids are now treated for depression through the pandemic and some kids were struggling in school. We never saw any of it. The kids were so happy to be with each other. It was a really incredible experience. And like I said, they actually went to their peers before they would go to counselors this year for help, which we never saw before. And even though they're kids, you know, it's going back to the basis of what all of us on this call do. It's about creating this environment where kids understand what each other are going through. And that kind of doubled for the pandemic as well. So the support that they gave each other was just really incredible, really inspiring.
Used a lot of chalk this year. We did, before the kids came in, we had the counselors go around and write just positive affirmations all over campus and, you know, welcomes and things like that. Plus we put chalkboards up all around campus with chalk. So, you know, you'd see people going along and leaving a message for someone or for the campus as a whole. So there just was a lot of really good energy, I think, as a result. And we are a camp where there are days when almost every program is off campus in the summer. And this year, nobody was allowed to leave and nobody came in. And, you know, it was really wonderful to kind of see everybody kind of all there together. And that was a comment that a lot of people had as well.
Great. So does anyone, we have 4 minutes left. So does anyone have any more questions, any comments, anything related to opening in a pandemic? Hopefully we don't have to be so strict next year. I think we all have our fingers crossed for that as we plan for 2022.
See, Tracy added that they too simplified things and their campers and volunteers loved it. So I think that seems to be an overwhelming theme, that bigger isn't always better.
Definitely. Yeah. Okay, well, I'll stay on for a couple more minutes if anyone wanted to ask me any questions. Again, that's my email right there. Please feel free to reach out anytime. I would love to help, and I love talking about programming all day. I would do it all day, and my dream job would be a program director 24/7 if I could. It's my passion and my favorite job at camp. So if you don't have any questions and you're logging off, thank you so much for being here, everybody. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ryan. It's been a pleasure to have you today, and I loved